The countdown has begun. Next week, Formula One will gather at the O2 Arena in London for the launch of the 2025 season, an event that will coincide with the celebrations for the 75th anniversary of the World Championship. Immediately afterward, teams will have to pack up and ship their equipment for the 3 days of testing scheduled to take place at the 5.412-kilometer Bahrain International Circuit in Sakhir from February 26th to 28th. From there, keeping up with the frantic pace, teams will return to their headquarters for a few days before heading to the Albert Park Circuit in Melbourne for the Australian Grand Prix, the first round of the 2025 Formula One Championship. It is therefore time for predictions, expectations that aren't limited to fans alone. Even within the paddock, these are days when some insiders dare to make forecasts based on more or less reliable information. The competitive order at the end of the 2024 Formula One season makes it difficult to predict who, at least in the early part of the championship, might have an edge. However, it is much easier to outline the goals that each team has set for itself as the new season approaches. At least 3 teams will be strongly targeting the driver's title, 2 of which see winning the Constructors' Championship as an absolute must. All have solid foundations to believe in these goals, but their ambitions will be tested on the track. Let's take a closer look at the top 5 teams from the 2024 Constructors' standings. First, let's take a look at McLaren, which should be considered as favorites at this stage. There is no plan B for the team led by former Ferrari engineer Andrea Stella. In 2024, McLaren celebrated a world title after 16 years, ending a 26-season drought in the team's standings. Just 3 months after the last championship ended, the only objective can be securing both world titles again. There are 2 major questions for the upcoming season. The first is Lando Norris's mental resilience, considering the fact that in 2024, the British driver showed some limitations when facing a head-to-head battle with Max Verstappen, and the second is Oscar Piastri's progress, as the Australian is expected to deliver performances on par with his teammate. Even the bookmakers agree. McLaren and Lando Norris start the 2025 Formula One season as favorites for both world titles, though with only a slight edge over their direct rivals. Now let's move on to Ferrari. Finishing just 14 points behind McLaren last season leaves no doubt about the Maranello team's goal in the 2025 Constructors' Championship. Expectations for the driver's title are also high, given that Charles Leclerc scored the most points of anyone in the last quarter of the 2024 season, coinciding with the final aerodynamic upgrades introduced by the Ferrari technicians and engineers in the United States Grand Prix weekend at the Austin circuit. Adding to this, the arrival of Lewis Hamilton has electrified the atmosphere within the Italian side. Winning either of the 2 titles would still be a significant achievement, with the Constructors' title being a non-negotiable target. But for both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, the Drivers' Championship is not an overly optimistic goal. They are well aware that 2025 begins with far more certainties than they will have 12 months from now, an opportunity that must not be wasted. It will be a tough battle, no doubt, but Ferrari has the tools to fight at the highest level. Besides Lewis Hamilton's arrival, the Maranello team has also completed the technical staff overhaul led by team principal Frédéric Vasseur, starting with new technical director Loïc Serra. The technical team that the French team principal has at his disposal in 2025 is the result of a recruitment campaign that began in 2023 and concluded at the end of last year. This is Fred Vasseur's Ferrari, and expectations are therefore high for the upcoming season. Next, we have Red Bull. After celebrating his 4th world title, Max Verstappen has disappeared from the radar. During the short winter break, the Dutchman was almost ignored by the media, which is something he surely appreciated, as they focused on Lewis Hamilton's first steps at Maranello and crowned Lando Norris as the early favorite for 2025. Without Adrian Newey, with a shaky end to the 2024 Formula One season, and with an internal reshuffling of roles that relied only on in-house talent, Red Bull does not appear to be a strong candidate for a leading role. But is that really the case? Can Max Verstappen be ruled out of the title fight? Speaking with several insiders, no one is willing to count the Dutchman out. Of course, much will depend on the technical competitiveness of his car, but we are still talking about a team that has dominated the ground effect era. Max Verstappen will start with the goal of winning. There is no other way. However, the outlook for the Constructors' Championship is different and will largely depend on how Liam Lawson integrates into the team. The days when Max Verstappen alone was enough to secure the Constructors' title are over. But what about Mercedes? The team led by Toto Wolff is a mystery. It has been for years, but in 2024, Mercedes sent out some interesting signals, proving to be a winning car in certain conditions, particularly in very low temperatures and even showing some margin for improvement. However, the F1 World Championship is not a winter tournament. Remaining competitive in all conditions and on every track is essential, and that is Brackley's primary objective. George Russell is a solid pillar, while Andrea Kimi Antonelli is a well-founded gamble who will need time to adapt before delivering the results Toto Wolff firmly believes in. Among insiders, Mercedes is not seen as a contender for the two world titles, but the 2025 Formula One season could mark a step forward with more race wins. All of this is in preparation for 2026, a year when many expect the Silver Arrows to make a comeback. It's also worth looking at Aston Martin when reviewing the list of the top 5 teams. It may seem odd, but for Aston Martin, the real goal in 2025 is to maintain the positions achieved at the end of last season. 5th place in the Constructors' Championship and 9th place for Fernando Alonso in the drivers' standings were secured thanks to a solid start to the season, which allowed the team to build an early advantage. In the second half of the championship, however, Aston Martin was outperformed by both Alpine and Haas, though neither managed to threaten Silverstone's 5th-place finish due to the gap accumulated earlier in the season. While waiting for the Adrian Newey-designed car set to arrive in 2026, Aston Martin is heading into a transition year where the goal is to cling to the best-of-the-rest status it secured at the end of last season. Hopes for a return to the top are all pinned on the 2026 season. For now, Formula One teams have begun revealing their 2025 cars in a series of launches to show new liveries, bodywork, and their cars' first laps ahead of preseason testing. McLaren has already unveiled its new car, and Williams is set to do so on Friday, but both will feature one-off paint schemes because, for the first time, the launch season will be centered around one night on February 18th, when all 10 F1 teams will reveal their new car liveries. London's O2 venue is set to host a live event due to feature the full 2025 driver lineup. It will be the first time that a full grid has been unveiled together to mark the 75th anniversary of the World Championship this year. The 2-hour-long show will include interviews with drivers and team bosses, as well as additional entertainment from Brian Burke Creative, which coordinated the 2023 Las Vegas GP opening ceremony, where drivers were presented on giant podiums. Next season is the last under the current set of technical rules, so while no team will turn down the chance to win the World Championship, each has a greater prize in sight, the opportunity to dominate the new 2026 era, when new regulations for both the cars and engines come into force. Any team with an advantage in 2026 could find themselves at the front for several seasons to come, as Red Bull did in 2022, following Mercedes in 2014. That means that teams designed their 2024 cars to last 2 seasons, with major updates expected for 2025, but no all-new designs. Resources can then be focused on developing the best possible concept for the following year. While the launch event may yield few clues as to the 2025 changes, the individual team launches and F1 shakedowns should reveal more. These will take place around the 18th of February event ahead of preseason testing. The shakedowns help teams to ensure that the cars are functioning as expected. Testing is restricted, so teams use one of their filming days, where they are allowed to run for a strictly limited distance, allowing promotional footage to be recorded.